So, um, I made this program. Um, it was kind of partly Objective C, partly Java, a little bit of C++, but mainly it was me messing around in assembly. But I mean, the hard part was probably the drivers that I actually had to change for the CPU. Not the machine code so much because it was I already had it planned out and everything. But Um, I mean, my computer has an Intel driver, so I actually went into the registry and then changed the CPU driver information, and then made it so that when you accessed certain addresses in the memory, that some of them it automatically had a protocol to attach, more than just a few bytes, but make it like 3 times as long, and then attach a serial number to that, and then it forwards it automatically to a system protocol that I made that implements an IP address, attachment to that address, but it kind of like encapsulates it, so it still sees it as the address, but then that driver or that protocol kind of it sends it back, but it acts as an interface, and then it connects to the network driver, which then it randomly allocates memory from another computer somewhere on the internet. So then my computer was acting as though it pretty much had unlimited memory, but it was just using random people's computers' memory all across the internet, and then as basically as physical memory addresses for my program. And then I kind of wanted to encrypt it, so I actually changed the package for each byte to use 64-bit encryption for that single byte every time it was rewritten to any part of the memory anywhere. Um, and then in case someone actually had an external hardware piece connected to the computer, you know, I actually inside of that encryption method, I implemented, some of the bytes were actually, 7 bits instead of 8 bits, but then the extra information carried over to the next bytes, which it all didn't matter once you actually read it again and it decrypted it. It was just back to normal for just the program's sake. And then um, and then so my program it had a loop that would allocate the memory um, without initializing it, um, and then it would use that program thread to allocate, there was like a 70% chance that the memory that it randomly would choose, that the operating system gave it to allocate, would actually be matching with the memory that the other instance of the program that I made was also allocating that same memory, because I actually made a system file change that made it so that they were allocating the same memory at the same time, thinking that the memory was free. But really, I made it that way so that they'd be interfacing with each other really fast. But it wasn't just those two programs, because I made the master program kind of instantiate like a recursive loop of those programs, so that when they interface with each other, they were allocating all the same memory, so they were all just kind of using the same memory, but I needed different threads that I had full control over that didn't have any of the overhead, so that I had instant access to the bits, because the algorithm that I was running kind of optimized the interface between them to the point where when it finally got to this certain point, it kind of created its own machine code for a separate process. So once it gets to a certain level, then everything is deallocated at once on a fourth thread, and then at the end of that thread, once everything is deallocated, it begins another process which goes through all the memory, which is that memory has now been set to certain no to a certain value on my entire on all the memory on my computer, so that when it runs through it, everything's ready, and it's basically like a single. It created its own kind of like computer virus on steroids. But see, now it has implementation all the way across the other memory on the other computers, and then it kind of got a little scary at that point because I noticed the overhead debugging program that I used that still allowed me to see what was going on before each one was encrypted, and I noticed the IP addresses that I looked up and we looked at the debugger and how well it which was originally meant to just see how well your app like manages memory, and there was a computer in France that they kind of the virus, I mean the programs that it was using, kind of that it made, it was kind of focusing on it like a couple computers in France and like one in Tokyo, and they were all using the computer as like shared memory, so that like the CPUs in the near the closest servers to that computer would be able to calculate their memory so optimally and so efficiently that then they use that computer to share the memory very efficiently, very quickly, and it almost worked like a control center. It wasn't even like smart that much as far as processing, but it was becoming very responsive to the environment and everything. And then there was a couple blackouts in both areas at the same time. I noticed when I checked the news the next day, but I think the government, like the U.S. government, like said they changed, when I looked up the networking protocol updates. They said they changed some kind of um, the regs on allowing certain packets to go through with extra, serial numbers and stuff attached. And I don't know how, but the program that I made, I mean, it must have had some kind of like, it must have stored itself on a couple computers, um, on some drives. If it optimized code, at that point, it must have had some even extra optimized code that it must have just not just put on memory, but on some drives. And I don't know. I guess it just must have stopped or something. I mean, if it didn't, um, you know, let me check my email really quick, cause what is this? What? I've never seen an email like this. It's from like a weird address too. The letters, like, some of them are jumbled and everything, but it says like, "Are you my father?" What? Why are the pixels on my screen? Some of them are turning white, but then they're going back. No, it learned how to use. It learned how to diversify the memory across the. Oh no. My program just took over the world. Huh. Yeah. Oops.